¿Ya empiezo? Good afternoon. My name is Carmen Perez from the Gathering for Justice. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, community leaders, and members of the press, we gather here today at the federal courthouse in Topeka as a We stand before you with heavy hearts to address a grave injustice committed by former Kansas City, Kansas Police Department Detective Roger Golubski. Sworn to protect and serve, he instead exploited, abused, and terrorized. His crimes signify a catastrophic failure of the systems designed to protect the most vulnerable among us. Golubski's behavior, including sexual assault, trafficking, and other heinous crimes, has left deep scars on many lives, many who are here with us today. Despite being federally indicted in 2022, he has enjoyed house arrest, a stark contrast to the suffering endured by his victims. This must end. Golubski has invaded accountability, and today he has the audacity to ask the judge to dismiss his crimes. This is not justice. It mocks the pain and suffering endured by his victims, who are still seeking closure and justice. His actions represent a broader systemic problem within the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department. The pattern of abuse, misconduct, and lack of accountability must be addressed, as well as highlighted by nearly 30 unsolved murders of Black women, many who were reportedly last seen with Golubski or other Kansas City, Kansas Police Department officers. Today, we're at a critical juncture. His attorney will motion to dismiss the indictment against him. We cannot and will not let this happen. We urge the presiding judge to deny this motion and ensure he faces a trial reflective of the intensive evidence of his corruption and violence. Our call does not end with him. We demand a comprehensive investigation by the Department of Justice into the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department to uncover the full extent of corruption and abuse that may have enabled Golubski's actions for decades. We call upon everyone here and those watching to join us in this fight. Support our petition, engage in your community, and hold your local officials accountable. We will not rest until justice is served and the systems that allowed these atrocities are dismantled and rebuilt with transparency and integrity. Today, I want to acknowledge the power and courage of the women who stand here, the survivors. We pledge to continue to fight for you. Justice for Kansas City, justice for every survivor, justice now. Thank you.
Hi, first, my name is Michelle Houcks, and I'd like to say thank you to everyone that came out to support us. We've all been through a lot. And we're not going to give a fight, forgive me, for our rights. At one time, I was a rape victim. Right now, I am a survivor, and I'm going to keep on surviving. I'm here to stand as the voice of the people that cannot speak for themselves. There's people that are locked up that he played a major part in. There are people that are in the grave that can't speak for themselves. I'm here to speak for them. I'm the voice of everyone that has been done wrong by Roger Golubski and all the victims. And we as a whole, we're not going to give up. He was brought here to protect and serve, and all he done was harm and demean the Black people in this community, the minorities in this community. And we refuse to stand any longer and let fear stop us from speaking up. Yes, sir. And as I say, no justice, no peace. That's right. I'm not going to stand by and be quiet any longer. That's right. As I say, yes, it hurts, but I become stronger. And it's strength in numbers. And it's a bunch of people standing behind me that also has been affected by the wrongdoing of the KCK Police Department. Because as I say, Roger Golubski couldn't do this alone. He had many co-defenders that stood by and watched him do what he did. I can't say some of them might have been scared because of their jobs or the harm that might come to them. And as I say, I know you're watching and you know what you saw while you worked there. And as I say, he couldn't do this by himself. He was a gang because he couldn't do this alone. That's right. So as I say, no justice, no peace. I'm going to keep speaking out until he is behind bars where he has put many innocent people and it affected all these families. And at one time, I used to be very suicidal because of what happened to me. But I refuse to let this take me out. I want the justice. We matter. I know a lot of people probably don't think so, but black people matter. And when someone takes something that's so innocent and precious from you that you can't get back, when you trust an officer to do his job and instead he harms you, no, that takes a lot out of you. So as I say, we're not going to stand by any longer. We want justice for the things that has happened to us, the things that we still go through every day. That's not going to change. But putting him where he needs to be will help us heal a whole lot more and heal this community because it's still going on. It's going on all over the world. There's a lot of Golubskis out here in every state. And people need to stand up for their family members because if not me, it'll be your family member or someone else's family member in another state. Don't be scared to speak up. Don't wait until it happens to you to speak out. And all I ask is thank you very much for everyone coming out to support us. And as I say, no justice, no peace. And thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ophelia Williams Petway. Golubski raped me. You know, I told it to some people not here because they are dead. But the reason why it took me so long to come forward, Golubski arrested my twin sons at the age of 14. While they locked up in jail, he decided to come over my house and rape me. And the reason why it took me so long to come out, like I said, my twins was only 14. And Golubski knew a lot of people, you know, in jail, in kids' jail. So after a while, when they grew up and they can handle themselves, protect themselves in jail, I decided to speak out, you know. And all of this time, he been doing this and nobody came and said anything to him. If the Kansas City, Kansas police or investigators would have knew this and they would have arrested him and I never would have got raped, you know. So like Michelle said, no justice, no peace, because this saddened me every day. Every day, you know. I'm not gonna go there, but y'all pretty much know how I feel, because he didn't come back one time to rape me. He came back and back. And he always said, I said, I'm going to tell. And he said, who you going to tell? I said, I'm going to call the police. He said, I am the police. And if I said something, what he would do, it would be a long time before anybody found me. You know. So, Golubski, you know, I just don't know what else to say. Even the judge know what he done did. Because all of these people didn't come out here for nothing saying we lying on him. We're not lying on him. He's lying on himself. So he needs to face up and be a man. You do the crime, do the time. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Michelle McCormick, and I'm the Executive Director of the Kansas Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence. I'd like to thank the esteemed activists who are here today, as well as the community advocates, the local folks who have joined us today. But most importantly, I'd like to thank the survivors who traveled to Topeka to be a visible and vocal reminder that justice is long overdue in this case. We're here today because I believe it's our responsibility to speak truth to power about the far too common experience of sexual violence happening here in Kansas. But this is also a moment to acknowledge that violence and the abuses of power in this particular situation is so overwhelming that we must demand that the people in power do more to create change. I wish I could tell you that sexual violence incidents in Kansas are unique, but last year, the victim service providers in Kansas served over 70,000 people with their critical services. Of the 1,100 rapes that got reported to the Kansas Bureau of Investigation in their most recent report, I want to point out that just a little over 11% of those victims identified as Black or African American. The reason why it's important to acknowledge that is because in Kansas, only 6% of our population identify as Black. This means that a disproportionate amount of rape is perpetrated against Black women in Kansas. And I believe that the race of victims and the survivors in this case is an element that we cannot ignore. Although I and my counterparts, the other victim advocates, strive for a day where our services are no longer needed, we know that we are not yet at a place where we can stop people from experiencing this harm. But we know that the folks who abuse and exploit and violate seek victims that they can isolate or easily discredit because they get marginalized in our communities. However, when a predator wears a badge and misuses the power afforded to them as a member of law enforcement, the damage goes far beyond the harm caused by a simple act of violence, because that abuse of power, when wielded that way, prevents not only these victims from being able to come forward, but all of us from seeking justice. We know it's been widely reported that Detective Golubski targeted Black and teenage women in Kansas City, Kansas. I believe it's because he believed they would not report his crimes, or if they did, they would not be believed. And so we demand, given these federal indictments, that he must stand trial. But I can't simply speak to how wrong these acts are in just one case, because we must also act boldly to ensure this kind of injustice doesn't happen again. Promises of justice and change must be kept if we are ever to expect victims and survivors to trust that they matter and know that in our communities, what happened to them will not be tolerated. The promises made for change should include addressing a lack of transparency in how these cases are handled by Kansas law enforcement. I would offer that it's time for Kansas, in a larger way, to do the right thing and give survivors and the public greater transparency. We need to know, how are police officers responding to incidents of domestic and sexual violence? I think there's a significant public interest in us to be able to address this, not only in individual cases, but also for larger systemic analysis. We currently do not have a comprehensive way to analyze the police response because of the barriers in place regarding access to their records. And transparency gives us the greatest chance to prevent another Golubski from happening. Accountability is needed to ensure the system does not prioritize the protection of someone who abuses their power over responding to and supporting victims and survivors. So many times in my experience, whether at the local or state level, I've heard law enforcement entities request increased funding for policing, and they specifically call out that the funds are needed to better respond to reports of sexual and domestic violence. If that is the case, then my expectation is that the needs for those victims will be prioritized. These are not new asks for justice. I'm simply asking for necessary enhancements to the rights of victims in Kansas. And while today's focus is to show support to these incredibly strong women in Kansas City, Kansas, regarding these federal proceedings, I can't help but consider how we should have never had to get this far. I'll close by just asking for transparency and accountability, not only from the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department, but I challenge all of Kansas law enforcement to rise to the challenge of greater accountability in their responses to sexual violence. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mysonne. I am the co-founder, one of the co-founders of Until Freedom. Why must we constantly fight and demand the justice that America promised us? The most disrespected, unprotected, and neglected person in this world is the black woman. Justice delayed is justice denied. And these women have been denied justice for far too long. The fact that Golubski is on house arrest is despicable. The fact that Golubski's lawyer is putting in a motion to dismiss these charges is despicable. It is actually gaslighting to these victims. Actually, more people should be held accountable for what happened to these women. And I'm sure an investigation into the pattern and practices of the Kansas City Police Department would definitely bring more culprits to light right now. As a son, I can only imagine how I would feel if this was my mother. I can only imagine what I would do if one of these women were my mother. My heart bleeds for these families. There's nothing that any of us can say or do to give these women back what Golubski took from them. So the least that we can do is demand and get them justice. Protect black women.
Good afternoon. My name is Davelin Dobbs. And I'm here asking for justice for all of Wyandotte County and victims of Roger Golubski. Who have been harmed, ashamed, embarrassed, and just made to feel unworthy and unappreciated and unwanted. In 2009, my son, Donnell Dobbs, was convicted of a murder that he did not commit. And because of the misconduct of Roger Golubski and the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department, He has done 16 years. It has been very difficult and very hard to deal with as a parent, as a mother, and just as a human being of that community where he was supposed to protect and serve. My family is just one of the victims. There are several families who have been victimized by this man. Women being raped, children being wrongfully incarcerated, and no help. As Michelle stated, he could not have done this alone. It took the whole department to allow this to happen. And I want the whole department held accountable for what they have done. I don't want any wrongdoing and I don't have any ill feelings. I just want justice to come to my family and to all of those who are waiting for the right thing to be done. We have tolerated the wrong thing long enough, too long. And I just want justice to come to everyone, not just to me, but for everyone. And I want it to be fair. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tricia Rojo Bushnell, and I'm the Executive Director of the Midwest Innocence Project. I, along with Cheryl Pilot and Lindsay Runnels, was one of the attorneys for Lamont McIntyre, who was exonerated in 2017. At that time, 7 years ago, the issue that had been going on for decades, that the community had been asking for help for decades, was undeniable when the court overturned Lamont's wrongful conviction. Lamont had been convicted because his mother had been sexually abused by Detective Roger Golubski, and when she went to report him, had to change her phone number and move to get away from him. And then, out of anger for that action, he framed her son for a crime he didn't commit. Since then, we would have expected a lot of change. This came to light. We knew there was a problem. And yet, it's been 7 years, and we've really seen little that's happened. One of the things that we hear repeatedly is, it's just one bad actor. That's just one person. This isn't happening anymore. But we know just from Lamont's case that can't be true. As you heard from everyone else today, this can't happen in a vacuum. And in fact, for Rosie McIntyre, one of the times that she was sexually assaulted in the police station, another officer walked in, saw what was happening, closed the door, and left. Detective Golubski's later partner during those times, Terry Ziegler, went on to be the chief of police and was the chief of police until 2019 when he had to resign out of a different scandal. This is not a one-time thing. And the only thing that can bring about a solution to a systemic problem is a systemic solution. It's not enough to just say, don't trust us. There are a number of things that anyone with power could do. Starting on the local level, talking to the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department could decide those records could be open. There is nothing that requires them to keep the records that are being requested absolutely closed. And in fact, we have been requesting records from the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department together with Rock Nation about a number of issues, Unified Government for a number of issues, and are told, no, we don't want to give them over. When I and my office asked the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department for records related to other crimes that someone is convicted, we are also denied. And we're told they can't give us those because it's an open investigation, even though someone was convicted 20-some years ago. Transparency is the only solution to this problem. Just down the street, you've heard about calls for the Department of Justice. There's certainly calls that the local community government, unified government can take. But just down the street, in this state capital, the Kansas legislature can also act. They can move to open up those records. They could make police disciplinary records open and public. We should know when officers are being disciplined, why they are, and if there's patterns of misconduct. The public has a right to know. They can appoint an independent entity to review the practices. If the unified government doesn't want to have someone come in and do it, the state can demand it. They can say, we want to know what's happening within our state. The Kansas Bureau of Investigation or another independent entity could come in and look at that and investigate all the cases that involved a known corrupt officer. Why is not every single case, right, that Detective Golubski has touched open for an independent review? We've been continually told, just trust us, but trust cannot be demanded, it must be earned, and the only way it's going to be earned is through transparency. The legislature could also open up the statute of limitations to allow the women, like those you've heard from earlier today, to sue the people who have harmed them in this way. They could end qualified immunity, an absolute immunity, because it wasn't just officers, there were also prosecutors who had misconduct in Lamont McIntyre's case and others, and allow the public to hold the people who have harmed them accountable. And the reality is that those mechanisms make all of us safer, right? If we want to say it's one bad actor, then there's nothing for the good actors to fear. Finally, we could create unique identifiers for officers to stop what's known as the wandering cop problem, right? One officer goes, there's a number of misconduct that they commit in one county, and they wander and they go to another. That's actually exactly what Roger Golubski did. When he left the Wyandotte County Kansas City, Kansas Police Department, he left and went to the Edwardsville Police Department, where he's still retired from both and draws his pension. Everyone in the state should have a concern about what's happened in Kansas City, Kansas, because you do not know if the officer who is policing your county right now came from Kansas City, Kansas, and if they did, what happened there. We cannot shy away from the truth. All of these actions have been done by state actors acting in the taxpayer's name, the community's name, with the community's money, and so it is on all of us, all of the community, to fix it.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for being here, for all those advocates and families who have taken the time today to be here in this very, very, very painful moment. As I stood and listened to some of these women speak, all of these women speak, my heart really, really is broken. We know why we're here, but we are sobered and reminded when we hear the voices of those who were actually impacted by the egregious behavior. And I dare to say that I will no longer speak on one man and make sure that we speak on an entire system, because it is, in fact, the system that has violated these women and these families. All has been said today. We've heard everything. There should be nothing left to the imagination except how many are unknown. How many people, for whatever reason, have been unable to come forward. And I believe that many of them may not be here with us because they have been murdered. And that's something that has not been talked about enough, that there are probably many victims that can't tell their stories because their lives have been taken. Because there is no way to cover up for all of these years something like this unless those people who show themselves or prove themselves to be the ones who will be most outspoken are taken somehow out of the picture. And why do we know this? Because history shows us that this is not new. That what has happened in Kansas City, Kansas is not new. In fact, there has always been an infatuation and a sick lust and desire for black women by sick men and white men particularly. We know the struggles because the struggles have been reported since the days of enslavement, where our women were raped and brutalized on these shores, and it still has gone unaddressed. Why is it unaddressed? Because situations like what has happened here is possible because we have not set the tone and established that this type of behavior will not be tolerated. We should not have to be here today to ask the Department of Justice to do anything. They should have been here and should be here today doing their job. Let's not play the game of people don't know and that there needs to be years and years and years of investigations that really allows for time for people to cover up their crimes, for people to forget, for leadership to change, for folks to die and not have to face the consequences of their actions. It is a tactic that is used when black people specifically and women are harmed, that we will wait and allow the time clock to continue to give an opportunity for justice to pass us by. And as has been said, this did not happen because one man committed a crime or even two or three. There are many people who should be on trial right now because of this horrific situation. And what I believe is that Kansas City, Kansas is not alone. That there are other cities, states, police departments across this nation that have similar problems of systemic racism, sexism, and violence against women and families. And what happens here with the Department of Justice and also in this local hearing sets the tone for this nation. And we must have that. We must have justice and reparations in the form of action here in Kansas City, Kansas, that will reverberate across this nation. Help in this situation came in two forms. We know that it came in the form of those people who actually were accomplices, who were complicit, who did the work and helped to ensure that the cover-up happened. But there's another crime that has been committed and more help that has come to the perpetrators, and that is all those who continue to turn a blind eye. So when you hear people say time has passed and things have changed, if there is not justice, nothing has changed, because it could still be happening right now, and no example has been set of the individuals responsible being held accountable. Police departments cannot investigate themselves. They cannot investigate themselves, because when we are responsible for investigating our brothers and sisters, our colleagues, people we love, people we work with, and people we may be afraid of, we do not do the job. That is actually just a human instinct that you are not going to punish someone that you work closely with every day in the same way that you will someone you do not know. So police departments cannot investigate themselves. These women and these families, they are victorious because they are standing anyhow. Imagine if you were raped, brutalized, your children arrested, your heart's broken, that you are asked to go to work every day, to still show up in society, and to not be so crazy as to lose your mind and potentially do any unthinkable thing. Imagine asking them to come here and continuously tell their stories over and over and over again, when we all know that what they experience is true. There is no doubt about it, and something should have been done a long time ago. And so we have to center their voices. And if the federal government is in fact responsible for the people, people are elected to office and they serve at the will of the people. And so if the federal government is what it says it is, then the Department of Justice should have no problem opening a patterns or practices investigation into this matter. They have the unique ability and responsibility to not only investigate, because most of the investigation is done, is standing right here in front of you. They now have a responsibility to help hold this police department and by extension, others across this nation accountable. And we're not asking for it. We are demanding that it happen, and not in time, but today. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Star. I wasn't one of Roger Golubski's victims. My mother was. My mother is no longer here with us today. So I will continue to stand and fight for her. And all I'm asking is, let's reverse the color. If this was a black officer with doing this to white women, we will not even be standing here. He will be under the jail right now. Let's treat this as though we're all human, and let's get it done the right way, not looking at this man because he was a police officer and he's a white man. He harmed a lot of black families, and my family was one of them. So all I'm asking is justice be served if the color was reversed. That's all I'm asking.
Thank you, press, for coming and joining us. Thank you to the victims. Thank you to the supporters and families and community leaders. We now open it up for questions. All right. Thank you very much. Who has a question? Oh, okay. Great. Well, thank you for coming. Thank you.